This is Dateline News and Conversation. My guest tonight is a good friend, and he's a friend of Crimea. He's back for another very interesting show, Ron Ridenour. Ron, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad to be with the Russian people again.
Well, the topic tonight, since you have been living in Denmark for 35 years, the topic tonight is the megalomaniac Donald J. Trump, who announced before, very shortly before he took the oath of office on Monday, that he wanted um, to take Greenland by a bribe or by force. He wants to take Canada and make it the 51st state. He wants to take the Panama Canal back. And I guess today he just renamed the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. Ron,
Yeah.
let's start with this. Denmark owns, as a colonial power, I believe, Greenland. Tell me a bit about the background because I really am not fully aware of it. How long has Denmark held Greenland as a colony? How is it run? Does it have any sense of independence? What's going on in terms of Denmark's political legal relationship with Greenland?
Well, I'd like to start a little bit differently. I think I'll tell you, I'll answer your question, but I think, that's a little bit dry. The most important thing to me is that this is the greatest thing I've ever heard in all the years I've been in Denmark. I came first in 1980. I've lived about 10 years other countries, and for 35 years I have witnessed that Denmark is a colony of the United States. Um, Greenland has been a colony of Denmark since 1971, 1721. I'll get into the developments in a minute, but I think that Trump is probably the most honest of all imperialist presidents that the United States has ever had, beginning with George Washington. Yes, he tells a lot of lies, but he told the truth when he said, I want America to be great again, and I'm going to take back this and that. And Greenland basically is also a military colony of the United States in 1950 because the another social democratic prime minister, the social democrats are supposed to be the good guys. They're for the working class, it's that, but just like the Democrats in the United States, which Trump exposed, they're the ones who wanted most of the wars. Not that I'm a Trump advocate, but the Democrats have been in wars all the time. And Trump said he wanted to end wars and not start them. Well, I hope that he does it with Ukraine. But yes, he's a megalomaniac. But he tells the truth about what the American people generally think is their right. American exceptionalism. The United States should control the whole world. He just says what the Pentagon and CIA have been doing all this time. So to your factual question, 1721, the Martin Luther missionaries invaded the natives of Greenland and forced them to be Christians. Now, Martin Luther was the greatest ideological spokesperson for the Reformation, which began to go into capitalism from feudalism. And what his doctrine was, eliminate all the Jews. He was Hitler's major man. In 1921, Hitler wrote Mein Kampf, and he said, Martin Luther is the greatest German nationalist ever. And Martin Luther wanted, witches, women that he thought were, didn't agree with him, they should be burned alive. And he burned them alive. He helped slaughter 100,000 peasants that were in uproar against the prince's landowners. So this country has been guided by the most immoral of all religious figures. He was an antichrist, and they're still doing that. The 10 bishops that control the church send priests to whatever country the United States want them to be sent to, and they're trained to kill. They're trained in pistols and rifles before they go there. They've been sent to Afghanistan. They've been sent to Iraq. This is an ass-licking colony. And then in 1814 they took over Greenland alone because they had Norway under them. And then 1950 Denmark granted the United States the right to have military control over Greenland. And then they kicked out the Thule Inuit tribe from that area so they could build their military base where they planted atomic bombs that exploded. Four of them exploded in 1968 because of an accident. They fell into the ocean. And then cleanup workers from Denmark and people and Greenland people living in that area got radiation diseases, and many of them died. And who was it that gave permission in the United States to do that? Another social democrat prostitute by the name of Hosea Anderson. And we never knew, and Hosea Hansen, and we never knew of this until 1991 when some whistleblower made a leak. Long live Julian Assange and all whistleblowers. And then in which year was it? I think it was in 2009 that they got home rule. So they had more control over their domestic things, but they still were under control militarily and for foreign policy by Denmark. And then in 19 in February 2023, the United Nations sent its representative to Denmark to investigate how Greenlanders were being treated. And he concluded, and I quote, "My biggest concern is the structural racism that Greenlanders encounter. Even though they are Danish citizens, they face a high degree of racial discrimination in all public services they require. The Danish government claims that the welfare state is equal opportunity, but in reality, Inuits endure significant administration and institutional barriers, as well as racism and racial discrimination." Now, Greenlanders, for the first time, are in the international news. And the mass media in Denmark is always censoring. But finally, they let the Greenlanders talk about how they feel about what Trump said. And so some of them say, he's worse than Putin. He's another Hitler. And the Danish people and the Greenlander people are saying this is the worst crisis since the Second World War. And what does that mean in a sentence or two is that the Danes have been lackeys of the United States since 1945. And all of a sudden, they no longer feel comfortable. They no longer feel that they are protected by their big daddy, the United States. And all of a sudden, their whole existence is in crisis. And it's almost like they're crying, what have we done wrong? And now they're trying to figure out how can they please the current emperor, who is another Mussolini, no doubt. But you know what? I think in the final analysis that the basic majority of the United States citizenry deserve him, because they got to wake up one day that they're not better than anybody else. And they're not going to win with this. They can't win with this politics. And they couldn't win with Biden, and they couldn't win with Obama, because the global South is rising up. And Russia has reclaimed their sovereignty with the great President Putin. They've taken back their sovereignty from that Lackey Yeltsin. And China is also waking up. And the global South is waking up. And these murderers, they've probably killed 300 million people, according to some analysis. They're going to get what they deserve. When, what you sow, you harvest.
Whoa. I'm not going to ask you to tell me how you feel. That was really very interesting. uh, the history of Denmark and Greenland, and I knew that the United States had an Air Force base at Thule in Greenland for quite a long time. I don't know if they're still there. Um, I'd like to follow up on a couple of things. Hey, Ron, you mentioned that Denmark has been a lackey of the United States, a U.S. colony, you said. Tell me a little bit about the politics in Denmark. Uh, I can understand that Denmark is, part of NATO. So
Yeah.
is Denmark completely subservient to the EU and therefore to the United States? What's the internal politics like?
Okay, well, in the very beginning, it was called something other than EU. I can't remember, but it was an idea that the European countries should get together over a particular trade, uh, inter trading. And at that time, the United States wasn't so glad for the idea, but they got used to it. Oh, it was called the European Federation then. And there was a big controversy in many countries. The real left then, and the pseudo left, the Social Democrats, or the not the Social Democrats, the Socialist Folk the different parties were against it. But at any rate, the majority went with it, and it was like coal, and it was internal trade. And so the United States, let it be, and then they worked with it. Um, some people thought that there should be an EU army. That has been in some of the back closets for some time. That idea may come up again now that they're not sure that the United States will honor them as actually independent nations. Um, the other presidents have not done so, just like Clinton, basically took over the economy of Russia for 10 years under Yeltsin. Uh, that's been kind of the way that the United States has treated Europe too, but at the same time, they had more free range than did Yeltsin. And there has been, progresses and in the internal economy. Germany was the strongest economy in in Europe. It was the major industrial country, and they depended upon, among other things, relatively cheap and relatively clean or less dirty uh, natural gas from Russia. And they own a part, I don't know exactly how much, but it's around 25% of the Nord Stream pipelines. Russia, Gazprom owns 51%. Both Holland and France also own a part of the Nord Stream pipelines. So uh, Denmark was not Denmark and rest of Russia, Europe were not dependent upon fossil fuels from the United States. Well, Wall Street wants to control the world, and Wall Street has always wanted to do that, whatever your president is. Much of Wall Street and the Pentagon and CIA did not like Trump in his first 4 years. They created Russiagate. They created the lie that he was in bed with Putin, sleeping in his boots, and then that was proven to be totally false. It was a huge lie. It had nothing to do with reality. But yes, uh, uh, Trump is a president in large part in a way that probably no other president in the United States has been, or at least I can't remember any, because he was first a capitalist. But the one big difference between him and much of Wall Street and the Pentagon is that he didn't make his money in war in weaponry. He made his war building buildings. So he wants to build buildings. He wants to have territory to build buildings. The Pentagon and the CIA did everything they could without murdering Trump, although they perhaps tried, or they were glad that somebody tried. They wanted, the comfortable Democrats to continue their wars. and to continue to let them do what Pentagon and CIA and Wall Street wanted. So um, internally now, Europe is in chaos. Um, Germany let the United States, if you remember the February 7 press conference in 2022, when Schultz was there with Biden, and Biden was asked, what about Russia invading Ukraine? And he said, well, if they do that, I will see to it that there is no Nord Stream. And he was asked, again, well, what, how do you know that? Well, I will do it. I will do it. And Schultz was not so glad. He went back to Germany. He didn't say that he was with it, but his arm got twisted. Now, I don't know why.
Ron, you were just talking a little bit about the politics and the history of Denmark. You were talking about the EU is in chaos.
Yeah.
Why don't you pick it up by explaining what you mean by the EU is in chaos?
Well, the only president so far in Europe that has come out with any strong statement was Schultz, in fact. He was terribly embarrassed in that February 7th, 2023 two meeting press conference with Biden. He didn't want to stop importing decent, gas for a decent price. But the United States forced him to do that. Now, that in and of itself, oh, and I have to make an addition. This prostitute, Mette Frederiksen, who is the prime minister of Denmark today, and she was the prime minister during the time of Trump, she's the one who said in London in 2019 at a London conference of NATO, she said to him, when she got out of the meeting with Trump, she said, "We swing well together." He had just uh, he had just told Mette Frederiksen that he wanted to buy Greenland from her, and she made the faux pas remark, "That is absurd." So he canceled his planned trip to Denmark because he was insulted. Well, ever since that time in 2019, and I've written a lot about this, Mette Frederiksen, and she's been prime minister since then, did everything possible that you can, imagine to please Trump, and now Biden after him, and now, Trump again, that they'll do that. They doubled their defense, so-called defense spending. They were the first to send F-16s to Zelensky, and to the fascist army of Ukraine, along with Holland. They were the first to send F-16s with the permission of Biden because he sold them to him. And now the Holland, the Dutch, prime minister that did that, he's now the NATO chief, right? So Mette was up to be the NATO chief, but they'd already had another Danish NATO chief, and then they had the Norwegian NATO chief. Well, it was the Norwegian government, the Norwegian Navy, as Seymour Hersh has proven to us, that along with the Navy of the United States, did the physical damage, the sabotage to Nord Stream. Well, at that time, same time, Sweden and Denmark were observers to that. They knew about it. So this prostitute has destroyed that gas line, which also means that the Baltic is so polluted that we can't even fish in it any longer. We can't eat the fish there any longer. It was the greatest pollution to the air and the sea in human history that humans did. Now, this is the Lackey of the of Denmark. And then when Trump says that, she says to him, like almost crying, "Well, we've done everything for you, Big Daddy. What more can we do?" I mean, we are the number fourth in absolute funding of the fascist Ukraine. Denmark, with 6 million people, have spent the number fourth after the United States, England, and Germany. Canada is there. And then Sweden and Norway, they're in the top 10 of giving or selling or whatever weapons and money to Ukraine. So all of Europe, all the politicians in Europe now are worried. What does this mean to them too? Are they going to take over some of our land? What should we say? And they're so quiet. But Schultz said, "This is not legal. Cannot be happening. This is not what NATO wants." I don't remember his exact words, but he was the only one who says something strong. Italy has said it's not a good idea. France has said it's not a good idea, but EU has not collectively taken a position yet. They are still worried what could come next from this man, Trump. So for me, this is the most positive thing that's happened to Europe since 1945. It is now a question. Are the people of Europe, and not just the parties, but the people, are they going to continue, the masses of the people? Many minorities, of course, many people do not, agree with this, but the majority in Europe overall have let Europe be a colony, a collective colony of some 1 billion people of the United States. Now there's a chance to say, hey, maybe we should find our own sovereignty. And maybe this could have something positive for BRICS because Russia and China and the rest of the people in BRICS are open to have everybody, also Europe and also the United States, in BRICS so that we can have Commonwealth for real, and not Commonwealth under under Great Britain or Great Make America Great America.
Okay, Ron, let's get back to what kind of deal could be made between Denmark and Trump to turn Greenland over to the United States. What do you think? Is there really any possibility that Trump could take Greenland either by buying it or by bribing the people in Greenland to say they want to be annexed by the United States or by force? What do you think is going to happen?
The home rule leader of Greenland, Ruti, said the other day, "We have never had such a, this is my own words of what he said, a major television program that lasted for 3 hours, where they recorded the major Danish television recorded in Greenland a session with Greenland politicians, civil Greenlanders, influencers, some they're called today, and Danish politicians. A woman was there from Greenland who is in charge of having made a court case against Denmark for illegal sterilizing the half of fertile women and girls in Greenland. 4,500 women were without their knowledge, generally, some perhaps put a spiral up their vaginas so they couldn't have children. She is the woman that I'm talking about was at this conference, this TV conference, and she asked the Danish politicians there, which included the number 2 and number 3 men in the government, the foreign minister and the so-called defense minister, which is really a war minister. She asked them to say that they're sorry about that. They wouldn't even do that. They said there's a court case involved in that and we can't talk about it. Their leader in Greenland said, if it had not been for January 7th, he didn't name Trump, but that was the day he said he wants to take Greenland with either force, military, or economic. He said, we would not be at this meeting. We would not be in international news. He didn't say we would still be a colony, but that was in it. That was there. We wouldn't be as strong as we are. Do you realize that after Trump did this, and I'm sure that if he could ever hear anything I say, he would say, oh, this is proof that I'm the big man. I'm the really big Mussolini of the world. Because Denmark then said in this period that they no longer are going to test women. That's another thing they've done. Psychological IQ testing of not just women, of Danish people to see parents, to see if they were intelligent enough to have their own children. They have taken away hundreds of Greenland's children from them because they didn't have a high enough IQ. And, experts in this, that know about psychological testing say these tests that they have given the Greenlanders, forced them to take, have been designed for Danish Danish, Greenlanders are Danish, but not Greenland or Danish, the white Danish with, that have the culture and their language that are, they are made for them and not for people who think mostly that's most important is skills. Well, the Danish government announced that now they're not going to give these tests any longer. So many Greenlanders probably are thinking, although I must not be, I cannot speak for them, of course, but I think that many of the 47,000 native Greenlanders that live there, and about 9,000 non-Greenlanders, that's to say Danish or have one or two Danish parents, people, I think many of them are saying, well, we don't want Trump or the United States to take us over, but I think we're pretty glad for what he said because we're getting international attention and we're getting some results. We're getting less colonization from that country. And people are so fooled, like Bernie Sanders, to think that somehow or another the social democracy of Denmark is some kind of socialist paradigm or something. It's like this is a paradise here. They are so wrong. They are so ignorant. Bernie Sanders doesn't know a thing he's talking about. This is a colony of the United States, and there's no socialism here. There is less and less welfare. My hand could be operated on for a disease. And the state system had 2.5 years before I could be operated on. They're spending more and more and more money for war and less on people. And I simply hope that Greenland will become independent. Now, that's comes back to your concrete question. What do I think? I doubt seriously that Greenland is going to be taken over by any military force. But it's very possible. There's an election coming up in April. 5 of the 6 parliamentary parties want independence. There's only one party that speaks highly of colonization. So it's whatever's left. Denmark gives $800 million to Greenland as a subsidy for a little bit of welfare and for policing and for so-called, military support. The fact is that the United States has been has controlled Greenland militarily since 1950. They have atomic bombs there. They had them there. They can have them there today. No country that gives the right to the United States to have military bases in their country has any control over what weapons they have there. That is forbidden for any national country in Europe or anywhere in the world to investigate what weapons the United States has in their countries. So the United States will win this battle in part. They will be able to take over much more military. They will, the threat is that Russia and China will be better trade partners, although they're both capitalist countries. They're both capitalist economies, but they're better capitalists. They give better deals to their partners than the United States does. So yeah, they're going to have more control. Whether or not they're going to make Greenland a state, I doubt that. When the Greenlanders finish their vote in April, the question of continue to being a part of Denmark is not on that ballot, but that will be, I think, on the next ballot. And it's quite possible that the majority of Greenlanders will say we want independence. But until they can get economic sufficiency, they're still going to be dependent somewhere on somebody. And I can't predict what is finally going to happen, but I do doubt that there's going to be military force and that it will become a state. I also doubt that Canada is going to be a state, but I am so glad that the lackeys in Canada are also, getting getting threatened, and whatever they're going to be doing there will also be very interesting. I think it's going to backfire. I think that Trump has got too much bullshit in his body, and that much of what he says is going to come back to him. And that maybe if we have 4 years, maybe, just maybe, within those 4 years, much of the working class that voted for him will see the lies, and that maybe they will take up the cause of becoming also independent from capital, and maybe begin to work to have a system that's based upon cooperation that some could call socialism. Until we're never going to get socialism if we don't fight. And there's going to be a lot of casualties. And a lot of these progressives, including some ex-friends of mine, think that it's better to go Democrat than Republican. And they're wrong. They're both equally evil. We're only going to get more rights when we fight in the streets. And yes, we have to go to jail. And yes, we have to be shot and killed because that's the only way we're ever going to be free. And the people of the United States are certainly not free themselves.
Well, I agree with with much of what you just said. I was not aware of a lot of what you were talking about Greenland, all the testing, the sterilization, the politics, and the feeling of the people and this upcoming election, which I think you made clear was not a referendum, but was just an election of uh, their political
Home rule.
body,
Home rule.
home rule. So they are somewhat autonomous then. So,
Yeah.
all right, I want to I want to talk about Trump and what he's doing to threaten much of the world. He's made it clear that America comes first. He's made it clear that he's going to use tariffs and sanctions on Canada, on China, on Mexico, because of, he claims, unfair balance of trade. We're getting taken. Um, it's been, God, almost 6 years now since I'm not living there. But I recall when I would go into the big box stores or buy anything from online, most of it was made in China. And most of the gas, automobiles, and minerals came from Canada. And most of our vegetables and fruits were coming from Mexico and Central America. So putting 25% tariffs and putting sanctions on these countries that Trump doesn't like is going to drive up the cost of everything in America, from toothpicks to clothes, from
Right.
automobiles to golf clubs. I mean, it doesn't matter. I can't see this being successful. And I don't know how people in America, when they figure it out, that they're getting screwed.
Well, we don't want it to be successful, Comrade Regis. You know, we want it to fail. If you really want a better world where the United States is not an empire or nobody is an empire, they have to fail before the working class is going to wake up, before Europeans are going to wake up. I think the best thing that China could do, I don't really trust the Chinese government. I must say that I know everybody on the left, the real left, wants them to be, the good guys too. But I want them to defend Russia. I want them to defend Iran. I want them to defend, with weapons. I want them to say, hey, just like President Putin said, February 24th, 2022, I've tried to be your friend. I've tried to come into NATO. I asked many times. I helped Bush with against the Taliban in Afghanistan, and you never treated me right. You never treated Russia right. And now it's over. Enough is enough. I want everybody in the world to stand up and say enough is enough. No more empires from nobody, anybody, nobody. Now, China needs to draw their investments out of the United States. I just saw that they stopped, of course, because the capitalist TikTok of China is a better competitor than others. So they can't stand, the U.S. economy can't stand real righteous competitors. There's no communism anymore in the world. There are a couple of communist parties that are in the governments of Vietnam, China, Cuba, and North Korea. But there's no communism. There's no socialism in the world. We need socialism. We need We need China to wake up and say, just like Putin said, no more, no more. We draw everything out of the banks, everything, all our investments. You know, the capital, the economy of the United States would fall. There'd be another depression. Then it's up to the people. It's up to the working class. Are we going to go fascist or are we going to go socialist? And I don't know which way they'll go. And that's always the risk. Much of the working class went in Denmark, they went fascist. In Germany, they went fascist. In Italy, they went fascist. In Russia, in 1917, they went socialist. And because they wanted to go socialism, the United States invaded them. You know, I mean, every Russian must know, they do know, that the United States has always been their enemy. And everybody in the world should wake up and see that the United States is our enemy, just like the Roman Empire was, just like the Greek Empire, just like Great Britain. Great Britain was the enemy. So, yeah, it has to get worse before it's going to get better. And I can't say that getting worse will end up better. It could even get all the more worse. But you know, how close have we been in these days to a nuclear war? Anybody who wanted to read, who wanted to think, I'm going bananas. I mean, you know, I think that there are forces in Denmark that would want to put me in a psychiatric hospital because I speak my mind. I tell them, like I'm telling you, what they are. They're lackeys. Where's your self-respect? How can you look in the mirror and call yourself Danish? You're the American state number 51.
Wow. Uh, I hear you. You know, the other thing about the United States uh, as an empire, it is on its last legs, I do believe, and I think most of the rest of the world can see that. The only weapon it has left is the military and these sanctions and tariffs, but the rest of the world is already finding ways to get around that. You know, I did watch Trump's inauguration, and one thing really bothered me, Ron, when you talk about fascism. I mean, the definition of fascism is the marriage uh, between government and industry. Uh, and this has been the case in the United States now for many years. I think the United States is a fascist country. But there was a line of billionaires from Zuckerberg to Bezos to uh,
Musk.
Elon Musk and some other guy that I didn't know in prime spots right behind Trump and a bit to his right, where they kept showing these people. I mean, they had prime seats better than any of the people in his cabinet, better than the Supreme Court, better than people in the Republican Party. I mean, the message to me when I kept seeing them going back and showing these guys, and then Elon Musk jumping for joy when we're going to plant a flag on Mars, uh, together with the rest of Trump's agenda, which is going to make America rich again and powerful and respected, um, it didn't seem to have anything to do with the American people. That was that was something I got out of this. Um, I want to know now, with the time we have left, um, Ukraine. Trump has been promising to end the war within 24 hours of the first days in office. That's passed. He didn't do it.
No.
Ron, there's no way, in my opinion, that Russia can or will compromise on any of its goals. There's no deal to make, absolutely no deal to make. And what it's going to take is total capitulation. And I think when Putin and Z look at the United States, they can see $37 trillion of debt. Um, they see a country that is out of control and completely mismanaged, chaos everywhere. What are your thoughts on the spot that Trump finds himself in today between a rock and a hard spot, is how I put it, because he isn't going to get his deal to get out of Ukraine gracefully. What are your thoughts?
Well, Trump's coronation shows much better than the Democrats. The Democrats were more psychologically cautious. Trump has such an ego. You can't imagine an ego bigger than his and Mussolini's. And he wants to be another Mussolini. It was a coronation. I think it's very positive that he showed the new capitalist class. He didn't show Rockefeller and Morgan, It's the new capitalist class that are behind him. The 200-year-old capitalist class who wanted, FDR killed or out, because they supported fascism in Europe then in the 30s and gave them a lot of weaponry of all kinds to do their war. This new capitalist class is now everywhere, and because they think that the majority, not just the people who voted for Trump, but the majority of American citizens, I think, have fooled themselves without knowing it that they're exceptionalists. American exceptionalism. The first black president Obama used American exceptionalism more than any other white president ever to prove to the whites that he was just as good as them, right? He made 5 wars himself. He took Bush's 2 and he added 5. He was the most warring president ever. The United States has never slept without a war going on. I think there were only 3 to 4 presidents that never started their own war. Carter was one, but he laid the basis for the Afghanistan war. I don't know, of course, I can't know how it's going to end in Ukraine, but it's going not to end in U.S. favor. It's going to end in Russia's favor and most of the people or at least the Russian ethnic people and the people of Crimean. It's going to end in their favors. I can't know when or how exactly, but they can't continue because they have basically lost the war already. But they want to kill more Russians. And I'm sorry, my friend, be careful. I don't want them to kill you, of course. I don't want them to kill anybody, but it's quite possible. I was going to come to crime. I was going to write a book about your people, and I couldn't get there because of this war. I would love to die in Russia, but it's just not practical for me now. I have a wife that I have to be with in Denmark. So, the future, if there is one, is with BRICS and with the Russian sovereignty, with the proud history of your peoples who have withstood and won over every major invasion against them. And that's the way this is going to end too. I simply hope that China will wake up and make it decisive that the United States is not going to take over Russia and not take over Iran. Now, that's another possibility that some idiot will push a button, such as the fascist Zionist in Israel, and push a button to invade Iran. And then I don't know how we're going to avoid a third world war.
You were just talking about the role of Russia and China and Iran. Something really big, huge happened last week
Yeah,
when Russia and Iran signed all kinds of agreements
right.
from economic to military to energy to nuclear, not necessarily weapons, but nuclear power for civil use. Um, this was huge, been reported all over here in Russia. Um, I don't think I've read anything from the United States acknowledging that happened. But Ron, in my opinion, and I want your opinion, this changes the dynamics in the Middle East big time. Now, Iran, which has always been friendly to Russia, has it in writing that Russia has their back. What do you think this means in terms of the balance of power in the Middle East?
A big question. I hate to, I think that the greatest sore that I can feel out of many great sores is that the Jewish people, having been persecuted, discriminated against, attacked for 3,000 years, subject to the terrible Holocaust of the Nazis and fascists just in my lifetime, are now doing something quite similar. It's not the gas chambers, but it's very close. And even the two international courts have either concluded or have on their agenda that this is genocide. In all of the coverage that I've seen in the Danish media in these last few days, including about Gaza, they don't mention the court's decision, the International Court, Criminal Court decision. They don't, it's like ignored. It doesn't matter. The United Nations doesn't have any power. In fact, the United Nations, maybe I'm abusing the English language, but the leadership of the United Nations are basically lackeys. You know, now it's the chickens are going to come home to roost, and Trump is doing it. I mean, I think, and I could very well be wrong. It could really lead to total fascism. That's on the agenda. But until the American people wake up, fascism and oppose what is already there, then the United States is going to go in that direction. Not just, the little bit we've talked about, and you think it's already fascist, but you can also see Italy's fascist. They got three parties in the government. They declare themselves a fascist government. But fascism is being accepted now. That's not a bad term. And communism doesn't even exist. The bad guys are capitalist Russia and capitalist Ukraine, Iran, and capitalist China. So what could happen with this is that either Netanyahu has more power in one sense in the world than did Biden have. If we talk about lackeys, I mean, Biden was probably a close lackey to Netanyahu. For the United States has always needed a Zionist Israel there in the Middle East since 1948. They've needed them to try to control the Middle East. What are these Gulf states doing? These six nations, they're silent. They're not doing shit. They let it happen. They let the genocide happen. They let it happen to Syria. Okay, there's these Shias and Sunnis. But ironically, Hamas are Sunni. The Hezbollah are Shia. The leadership, Assad, and the leadership of Syria are Shia. But you've got some Shia helping Sunnis in Gaza, and you've got the big Sunni nations basically helping Israel and the United States by doing nothing. So the world is extremely complex. And that's what my love partner tells me all the time. It's like, the Danish people can't understand what the hell's going on in the world. It's just too complicated. And nobody takes the time that you and I do to figure out what's going on in the world. It's so crazy that everybody's with their smart telephones and their tattoos and let's have fun. I can't predict what's happening, but you're right. This is like a big, big, big charge of this is like saying to the United States and Israel, keep your hands off of our area of interest. And Iran is an area of interest. It's also in BRICS. Turkey wanted to be in BRICS, but they're also with NATO. Saudi Arabia wanted to be in BRICS, but now they're on hold because what are they going to go with BRICS or are they going to go with the Yankees? So much of the world is like, where can I get the best out of things? The whole world is in chaos. And all of these immigrants coming from Latin America, from Central America, from Venezuela, most of them, in my opinion, not that I am opposed to their wanting to live, of course, but they should stay in their country and fight for their rights in their country, because the United States is the major problem in the countries that they're fleeing from. Venezuela is not a fascist, or Venezuela, the sanctions, etc. So there's so many sanctions going on against Iran, against what is it? One 40% of the world is being sanctioned, you know? So my only hope is that that 40% of the world says we're going to stay where we are and fight these. We're not going to let them force us out of our country. And now, there's certain countries in Latin America that are trying to take certain new governments that are trying to take back their sovereignty, still being threatened by the CIA, et cetera, of course. But those people ought to stay there. My editor in Cuba wrote to me not too long ago when I lived in Cuba for 8 years. I worked for the Cuban media, and I have 6 books written on Cuba. And my previous editor wrote to me and said, I have to go to the United States. I'm sick. I have to go to the United States and and die there or something. I said, you're going to the enemy. Stay in Cuba. And if you don't like what's going on, fight there. So that's what I say to the world. You've got to fight. We're not going to get what we want by writing Christmas cards. But it's going to this next 4 years are going to be all the more tough. And people that see this, where everybody has to fight. If you don't fight, you're a lackey. You let it happen. And I can't predict how the fight's going to come out. Nobody can. Maybe a deal can be made. But
yeah,
the Yankees, yeah,
I'm
the
sorry.
Yankees are going to be Yankees until somebody kicks their ass in one way or another, you know?
I asked you whether you thought Trump will finish his term,
Yeah,
and right away you started talking about the CIA and you know uh, Kennedy assassination. Well, Trump, and the reason I asked you this question, has come out and said he's going to declassify all of the information the government's been withholding about the Kennedy assassination, Robert F. Kennedy assassination, and Martin Luther King. Now, Ron, the reason I asked that, some of those people who were involved in one or more of those are still alive,
yeah,
and most of us believe the CIA was involved in all three of them.
right.
I'm
But
not
those
even,
papers, the documents don't exist any longer. I mean, they're going to burn them. They're not going to let those documents come out, you know? There's not
well,
going to be any proof. And I don't think that the CIA is going to kill him, because I think that there's somebody there. We don't want a Mussolini. We want this, we want somebody we can control. We can't control Trump. If they can't control Trump on 1 or 2 years, they're not going to kill him, because they're afraid that the working class that supports him will really take up arms. They got arms. Unfortunately, the few of us on the left, we don't have guns, you know, and we can't win for socialism with guns, with just a few guns. So I don't know that I don't think they can kill him, but I think that they're going to do everything they can to stop him from doing what you just said. And we also know Trump says a lot that he doesn't follow through with. But this time, this may be his last time. Maybe he can figure out how to change the Constitution, and come in again. But the fantastic thing about Trump is that despite he wants to be Mussolini, and he wants, and he says Biden is a communist, and Biden says he's a Hitler. I mean, the Democrats are communists. Trump doesn't know what communism is. I mean, there's never been any socialism in the United States. But we have to go there. We have to go toward socialism, or we're never going to win. And whether or not the CIA will kill him, I seriously doubt it, but it's possible.
hey,
It's
well,
possible
Ron,
because they're desperate now. They're really desperate.
Ron, if the CIA or somebody else doesn't kill him, well, those double quarter pounder cheeseburgers and French fries and Coca-Cola will certainly finish him off.
Yeah. I don't
Ron,
know.
I want to thank you for joining me tonight. We got to do it again. There's going to
Yeah.
be an awful lot to talk about in the next few weeks and months.